Hey guys, Chris Haddon here with Hard Money Bankers with another very, very cool interview for our friends at Inman.com. I'm here with my friend Cher Castillo with Compass Realty. Cher, thank you for taking the time.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you this morning on this Monday morning?
Great. Busy as ever.
Yeah, good stuff going on in DC, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Market is booming.
We are going to dive into some very, very cool stuff. Before we do that, would you mind giving us a little background on yourself, where you came from, how you got involved in DC real estate?
Sure. So I came to DC about 20 years ago to work on Capitol Hill, but I fell in love with the DC market and bought my first house in the Eckington LaDroit Park area
Hmm.
for $135,000. And then I sold it 2 years later for $450,000. I was 25 years old at the time, so I knew real estate was where I wanted to be.
Wow, that is great timing. And that was your primary residence. You lived in it for 2 years and then sold it tax free.
I did, yes. It was amazing.
That is a great start. I actually didn't know that part about you. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm sure you're hooked after that, right?
I was. And then I was invited in to be a partner at a real estate firm. So it all happened very quickly for me, a boutique real estate firm that was just starting. So my then team members became my partners, and we bought a commercial building on U Street and started a company together. And I was there for 7 years as an agent, and partner as well. But then I wanted to get into development, and my partners weren't ready to do that. So I started my own boutique real estate firm, and we did development and brokerage as well.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about that because obviously why I mentioned I wanted to have you on is because you do have such a good blend in your business of the investor side and the agent side.
Mhm.
I expected to hear that you got started more with sales and then moved into acquiring properties, but you kind of dove into both at the same time, which is
I did. It kind of simultaneously happened for me. So, working on the Hill as a press secretary, I wasn't really making a lot of money at that time. And once I bought my first house and sold my first house, I fell in love with the entire real estate process and learned that not only could I make money from, getting a commission, but also from potentially fixing and selling. That was then my goal, to move from sales directly into development.
okay. So in the early years, how did that progress? How did that grow in terms of finding clients, doing your sales, primary residence, normal agent type of work, and
Mhm.
acquisitions with your team? Like how did that grow in the early years?
So for me, because I wasn't from DC, I had to just spend my days meeting people. So I was heavy on the networking side. I was at every happy hour, every real estate happy hour, every non-real estate happy hour, meeting and growing my network. And eventually, that became my sphere of influence. So after 15 years in the business and, giving great service, I have a great sphere to pull from, and that's how I maximize, I use my sphere to maximize my sales and grow my business that way.
Okay. From networking, being on the scene before all of the web marketing and all of that came around.
Before all of that, yes. The old school way.
Like that. All right, let's talk about the DC market for a second because in the time you've been here and been in business, it's changed a lot. It's
Yes,
grown a lot. Neighborhoods where you might do maybe a buy and hold many years ago turned into a flip later on, or maybe even a condo conversion. How
yes.
has your investing business progressed with the DC market?
Well, I would say that when I first started investing, I started in an area of DC called Petworth, and I was acquiring properties for right around the 200 to 250 price point, doing
Mhm.
full gut renovations and then reselling in the high fives, low 600s. So the profit margin was awesome. As everyone became a flipper and developer, things
Yeah.
started to change in that area. So what do you do when that happens? You move to a new area. So then I started focusing on other areas, specifically in Northeast DC, because I saw most of the growth going on in Northeast. That was experiencing the most change, especially with the H Street corridor changing. And I was actually living in Northeast DC at the time, in the Trinidad area, which is very close to the H Street corridor. And when I bought that second home 15 years ago, that was a particularly different area. And it went from different to developing. It went from developing to all the way there right now, where homes that used to be 200,000 when I bought are now 8 to 900,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was a second primary residence that you bought?
It was a second primary residence. And actually, I have a really cool story about that area as well. I bought a house about 3 doors down from my second primary residence. And what I did was I turned that into 3 luxury condos, sold those condos, and I literally blew the back out, went up a level, excavated about 1.5 feet, turned them into 2,000 square feet condos, and one 2,000 square feet, and then the other was 2 1,500 square feet condos. Those actually went for more than homes did in that area. So the first level went for 800,000, and the other 2 levels were at 700,000 and 750,000. So if you can believe that condos are now going for more than homes on the very same block I bought in 15 years ago, it's quite unbelievable.
Yeah, that is incredible. That is fantastic timing on your part. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
There's one question that I'm sure agents who are watching this are asking themselves. How'd you learn how to GC a job, especially big ones like that?
I learned through watching, and that's the way I learned everything. So I had a lot of investor clients, and I would shadow them almost as often as that they would let me. So I would go to projects with them. And of course, they always want to hear from the agent, what do you think? What sells? Should we put a bigger closet in here? Should we use this kind of hardwood? What should the layout be? Should it be more open? That kind of thing. So in getting their advice from me, I would also watch what they were doing and learn that way. In my first projects, I was lucky enough to have a husband that was also a developer. So he trained me in that way, but I also watched the project managers that we hired to learn. I did a lot of reading, but it was my everyday involvement with the projects that really helped me the most.
Yeah, that is definitely one that you guys should write down. Shadow your investor clients. They want your advice. They want your help. You can provide them with info, and vice versa too. Yeah, don't forget that you can learn about what they're doing, apply that to your own business. That's very cool. These days, how do you balance your development business and your rental properties and things like that you own from your agent work?
So that's a good question. And it's a tough balance. I mean, honestly, it's like sometimes I'm very client heavy. So I have to, take down my developer load a little bit. And sometimes it's the opposite. I'll have a lower client so I can up my development projects. Last year, it was a little bit of a switch for me. So I had 10 projects going on last year. So I was a lot less involved with my clients, but I do have a team. So my team kind of took over the clients that needed more help from me. Because the last thing you want to do is provide bad customer service and, focus on what you're doing. So I didn't want to do that. And I had my team kind of take over where I needed them to. And then I was very focused on my projects. And then this year is a little different. I'm more client heavy. So I only have 2 projects going on at this point, which is last year, this time I had 4 projects going on. So it's just really knowing how and where to put your focus, because if you always want to provide the best service and do the best job, then something has to give a little. And so maybe you have to tone down the development projects and focus more on the clients, or vice versa.
So month by month, quarter by quarter, you're looking at your pipeline on both sides of the business to determine exactly where you should put your focus and that of your team.
Exactly. So, let's say just for example, I looked at my pipeline a couple weeks ago and I had 26 clients in my pipeline for the next quarter. I was like, okay, this is client heavy. There is no way I can do more than one or two projects and service this many clients, even with my team. So I decided that I'm just not going to do more than two projects until that client load goes down.
Okay. No, that's smart. A lot of investors try to do too much too fast, and they might not have that discipline to back off when necessary. Even if they're just investors alone, people make the mistake of thinking that more is always better. And believe me, we've seen it from our end that it's not the case. You could do two or three projects great, or you could do five projects not that well. And that's not a great place to be.
Right.
So you mentioned your team a couple times. What does Cher's team look like? Break that down for people, like who's doing what over there to make it all happen, to make everything.
So funny that you asked that, because we are going through some changes, and great changes, right? So as the team grows, we need a little bit more direction and operations assistance. So my team consists, it's 9 of us right now, and we don't have a director of operations. So I'm in the process of looking for a director of operations to kind of streamline everything for us. That way, no one gets lost in the madness as we grow. And that's on the sales side. On the development side, I hire project managers as needed, depending on the number of projects I have going on. I also work with my fiance, and he helps as project manager sometimes as well.
That's great. That's great. Okay. So where do you see things going from here? In 5 years from now, in a perfect world, what would your operation look like?
So my operation would look like doing anywhere to 40 to 50 flips / development projects on a yearly basis. And I would be feeding my team these deals so they wouldn't have to work so hard to acquire leads outside our circle. Right now, I, on average, do anywhere between 8 and 12 deals a year. So that would be stepping it up quite a bit. And I do everything from cosmetic quick flips, putting about 50 grand into a deal, to full ground up stuff, 3-4 townhomes that we can squeeze on the right lot in the district or in Maryland. That's where most of my business is. So really, taking my development projects up and streamlining that whole process and allowing my team members to benefit from that. Okay.
So the development business will continue to grow, the sales side too, but while keeping everything under control. It seems like no crazy huge growth plans, but just kind of slow and steady, and it all snowballs over time.
Absolutely. And one thing I do plan on doing more of is buy and holding. I do have some properties that I buy and hold right now that I primarily Airbnb, which has been extremely lucrative for me, even though it's a pain in the butt. Airbnb is very time consuming. So while you're making probably double the amount of rents you would make on a normal basis, there's a lot that goes with that. So I'm thinking of kind of keeping a couple projects Airbnb, or a couple of the properties Airbnb, and then acquiring more multi-unit buildings, and that way I'll have less, maintenance drama with that.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet that you could put the resources from your team towards some of those Airbnbs too.
Exactly.
Because they are more work, but definitely more rental income. We've seen some of that over here as well. You do a good job of documenting everything you have going on with sales and your projects. Where can people find you to learn more about you and your deals and everything else?
Oh, absolutely. So they can find me on Instagram at Flip Queen DC, like Flip Queen D for District of Columbia, DC for District of Columbia, and also on my website, flipqueendc.com.
Awesome. Cher, thank you again for taking the time to be with us. Very, very cool interview. And we should do it again. I feel like we could dive into these subjects in more depth.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks again.
All right.